Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Well, I'm back. I took a 2-week hiatus from Effed Up News. The first week because I was traveling, I was on a flight. Last week because I just wasn't feeling great. And I wanted to support Karen Ann Harlos in her fight against the Libertarian National Committee, which is total like inside baseball, libertarian stuff. But that's what I was doing last week. It would just happen to happen at the same time. And I wasn't feeling great anyway. So it was like two birds, one stone, man. But we're back and we've got a full episode. So much effed up stuff this week. So much stuff. I mean, trust me, I'm not going to cover nearly all of the effed up news for the week, but I have picked out a few that I think are just extra special. So let's dig into it, folks. If this is your first time watching effed up news, this is a stream that I do almost every Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, except if I have something else going on, like I'm on an airplane or something like that, in which I just cover a variety of stories that have come up throughout the week that I haven't had a chance to cover on the channel. Now, my content on the channel has been a little bit light lately just because there's been other stuff going on. So usually I cover a lot more stuff than I am, but hey, it works out well because we have this time to kind of catch up on some of the stuff that I'd normally be covering throughout the week, but I've just been distracted. I do hope to return to my regular level of content production this coming week. It's been busy. Been a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I know you guys are bearing with me as you can. But we got a whole bunch of news stories that we're going to talk about this week. Before we dig into it, I just want to remind you that the very best way that you can support the work I'm doing and to actually get a sneak preview on what I think of most of the content that I cover on the channel, because I usually talk about it in Locals first, is to join my Locals community. Locals is 100% free to join. You can join by going to kb.locals.com and you can join and just check out the community, lurk around, see what's what, see what people are posting. It's not just me posting in Locals, it is a community. So I have an amazing group of people there. But if you do want to support the work I'm doing, make sure you head over to kb.locals.com/support. You can unlock all the features in Locals for a monthly fee starting at $5. You can do more if you want to, but you don't have to. So $5 a month, you can do $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. Or you can make a one-time gift. All those things help support the work I do, and I greatly appreciate it. My Locals are awesome. I actually spend about 6 hours a week on private Zoom calls with my local supporters, and we talk about all sorts of things. We talk about what's going on in the world. People talk about what's going on in their lives. It's a support group. It's a group of people that are helping each other maintain their sanity in insane times. Many of them are in the chat here today. So if you have any questions about my Locals, I'm sure some of them will be very happy to answer it. Now, please make sure you mount that like button, of course. And guys, fun fact. So I logged in. I'm actually normally don't really even look at my YouTube statistics all that much, to be honest. But I logged in. I logged in last night, and then I logged in this morning to like see some comments that people were leaving on the channel. That's a different topic. Check out my Twitter if you want to know what's up there. And a funny thing happened last night between like 11 o'clock at night and between about 8 a.m. this morning is like 100 people magically unsubscribed from my channel. Now, I know that people have strong feelings about me sometimes, but I do find it hard to believe that 100 people woke up in the middle of the night on a Saturday when I hadn't posted any content on Saturday to say, you know what, Garland is such a bitch. I need to unsubscribe from her channel right now. So, you can really help me out with these YouTube shenanigans because YouTube does this to me like almost every single day. They unsubscribe people from the channel. First thing I need you to do is to double check. Make sure you are subscribed. If you are subscribed, make sure you have notifications turned on. That will increase the odds that that you are actually shown my content when it comes up. And please make sure you like the videos that you're watching because that's going to make it more likely that YouTube is going to actually serve my content to you as well. But one thing that you can really help me that would really help me out is if you guys shared my content around with your friends, people who are interested in these types of topics, because that's really the only way I'm going to be able to grow the channel. I mean, the fact of the matter is that my channel has not grown at all in any way in the last year. part of the reason why I emphasize locals so much, right? Because my locals is growing. My locals is actually the thing that helps me stay independent to be able to tell you guys the truth. But if you guys could make sure you're sharing my content out to help me grow this channel, because this is still a major revenue stream for me. It's one of the things that I have to do to be able to maintain what I'm doing. Please share it out with your friends, encourage people to subscribe, all that good stuff. It's going to help me out. George Andre Veloso Nunez, I think I'm pronouncing it right now, says, "We do. I strongly love you." I love you too, George. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. All right, let's get that banner down. We'll get our little ticker up. Guys, let's dig into the news. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is something I'm not actually going to talk about, which is Alec Baldwin. I'm putting this up here just because I enjoy the irony of this particular juxtaposition. But I want to say this, like, obviously Alec Baldwin and this incident that happened on the movie set has been dominating the news and like the commentary and all this stuff in the last week. I think that what happened here is a tragedy. It's a tragedy when anyone needlessly dies over stupid human mistakes. I I have mixed feelings about what's going on in terms of, the conservative right mostly, but also, I mean, we've got a libertarian in this regard, like dunking on Alec Baldwin. I have mixed feelings about it. But the reason I have mixed feelings about it might not be what you think, because it was a funny thing. So I retweeted this tweet just because I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition. I don't really care about Alec Baldwin, to be quite frank. Like, I know a lot of people like are 2A people, and obviously my husband is one of them. My husband is like very into guns at the moment. But like I just don't really care. Like I really, this is not an issue that I spend any time thinking about. That's not to say that I want like it to be infringed on or anything like that. I just don't really care that much. It's not my issue. But the reason that I wanted to talk about this is I retweeted this because I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition. And then I get a message in my inbox from someone who actually, like, I consider this person to be a friend, but he's definitely a little bit more on the left. He has a mask in his profile and all that. And he's like, "Carlin, how dare you use this opportunity to dunk on someone when people are dying?" And the only thing I could think of is I have watched death be wished upon anyone who's unvaccinated for months. I've watched the woke left literally wish death on people I care about every single flipping day for months, up to and including me. Now, of course, like for people who don't know, like I actually got vaccinated last week for reasons like I'm not like I told you guys I was probably gonna get vaccinated to travel. Like this was not any big secret, but I did end up doing it. So apparently it's okay for me to live now. I guess I have that going for me, but it still really, quite frankly, pisses me off when a good chunk of the population is literally wishing death upon people for making a private medical decision. And yet, when this happens, when Alec Baldwin accidentally kills someone, that's just there. Everyone is clutching their pearls over the fact that people are using it to dunk on the left. I'm sorry. I have mixed feelings about the entire thing, but if you make the argument to me that, "Oh, someone died, we just shouldn't. We like this is just too much." Stop wishing death on unvaccinated people and then you might actually have my attention. Don't be a hypocrite. Sorry. Don't be a hypocrite. I don't think I'm asking too much. So that's really all I wanted to say about the Alec Baldwin thing. I really felt that I had to address it simply because everyone's talking about it. I don't really care all that much. There's things I care about a lot more, including this story. From the Washington Free Beacon, White House knew about the letter that compared parents to domestic terrorists. So you remember that memo that came out from the National School Board Association a couple weeks ago, and it was that memo that basically was asking for parents to be labeled as domestic terrorists. You guys remember this? We talked about it quite a bit. Well, it turns out they colluded with the White House in the writing of that memo. Now, I need to take a moment to like pat myself on the back here, because you know who was the first person to report that the board of the National School Board Association was not happy with the CEO of the National School Board Association for this memo. That was me. I reported that on October 6th. National School Board Association president did not consult with his board prior to asking parents to be labeled domestic terrorists, so whistleblower spills the beans about his attacks on free speech. I reported that on my Substack on October 6th. So please make sure you're subscribed to my Substack if you'd like to get more breaking news there. But you know what? When I put stuff out there like that, I've emphasized many times, I'm not a journalist. I occasionally perform acts of journalism almost against my will because I really don't like doing journalism, but I'll perform acts of journalism on occasion in instances like this when I have whistleblowers coming to me saying the board did not approve this letter before it was sent. And what I hope happens is I put this information out there and then real journalists do real journalism and they go follow up on it. And thankfully, in this case, that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. Real journalists, along with Parents Defending Education, did some FOIA requests and found the emails and found out that, yes, the White House had colluded with the School Board Association to write that letter. Let's read this article from the Washington Free Beacon. The country's largest school board association collaborated with the Biden White House before sending a controversial letter calling on the FBI to investigate parents as potential domestic terrorists, according to previously unreported emails. The emails obtained by Parents Defending Education through public records request and reviewed by the Washington Free Beacon reveal that the National School Board Association president and CEO that sent the letter to Biden on September 29th without approval from the organization's board. Again, I reported that on October 6th. The letter said that the acts of some parents at the school board meetings across the country could be considered a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. The emails also show that the White House asked the association for examples of threats against school board members days before Attorney General Merrick Garland created a task force of officials from the FBI and the Justice Department to determine how to prosecute alleged crimes at school board meetings. The letter makes clear that the White House was aware of the letter before it was released, while raising questions about whether the White House colluded with the association on the letter to prompt federal action. So, guys, what essentially happened? What essentially happened? And I had been looking in. I started kind of looking into the CEO of this school board association too. So he has ties to different like woke lobbying firms. So what probably happened is the White House contacted this CEO, said, "We want your organization to write this memo to us asking for our help so then we can respond by creating this task force." The whole thing was planned. And that's what we need to expect anytime anything related to topics that we care about come out of the Biden White House. We have to expect that it's all orchestrated, it's all planned, there are no accidents in any of this, and then it's just a matter of finding the connection. So they colluded with this CEO, who, by the way, is the interim CEO of the association. So I really hope that the board ultimately ends up firing him. We'll talk more about that in a second. But they colluded with this guy to get him to write the memo that they wanted him to write so that they could issue the response they wanted to issue. Nothing that happens in these lands is organic. Nothing. So you always have to assume that if something comes out like that memo, that there is a bigger picture going on. The letter has sparked allegations that the Biden administration is trying to stifle dissent among parents who oppose mask mandates and the teaching of critical race theory at America's schools. School board meeting has become battlegrounds for factions of parents torn on these issues. Parents in some districts have organized recall efforts to remove school board members who support mandates or radical curricula. The emails also show that members of the National School Board Association Board of Directors voiced frustration that officials sent out the letter without their approval. Again, since no one likes to give me credit for things, I reported on that over 2 weeks ago. I don't always need credit, man, but like when I actually do something, I want to give myself credit. No one else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. George Andreveloso Nunez says if action movie actors had gun safety classes instead of CRT, this could have been avoided. Yes. Yes, probably. I mean, I don't even like why are they even using real guns on movie sets? Like, why are they even using real guns? Don't they have props that look effectively real? I just don't understand. One director at the association said that the letter had awakened hostilities that were just beginning to subside. Many of us have been put in a position now of explaining or defending this action of our association as we are asked by members of our community if we consider them domestic terrorists for showing up to our meetings and expressing their opinions, said John Halkias, the director for the association's central region. Halkias said that he and other board members would not have likely approved the letter, which he said used terms that were extreme and asked for the action of the federal government that many of us would not request. Viola Garcia, the president of the association, and Chip Slavin, the CEO, disclosed in other emails to the board that they had been in consultation with the White House and the Department of Education regarding an alleged rise in cases of irate parents showing up at the school. Slavin wrote on September 29th that he and Garcia sent their letters to Biden concerning threats to public schools and school board members. He said that in talks over the last several weeks with White House staff, the administration had requested additional information on some of the specific threats. So the letter also details many of these incidents that has been occurring. Garcia wrote in an email to the board on October 2nd that the association had been engaged with the White House and Education Department for several weeks on the school board protests. We felt compelled to say when we start hearing about threats, harassment, and acts of intimidation at school board meetings. Garcia and Slavin, predictably, did not respond to requests for comment. And they actually have, if you look at the article, they've got all the emails. They've got them all. I'm not going to read them all to you. You guys can go and look at the article for yourself, but they've got all these emails that there was absolutely collusion going on this issue, which would have surprised no one who read my Substack on it 2 weeks prior. I haven't been trashing Baldwin because of this tragedy. I'm dunking on him for all the gun tragedies he has heaped on all gun owners for decades. I mean, I think that that's a perfectly fair thing to do. I also I don't know, man. I think there are, to be honest, like, you're not going to win anything by dunking on Alec Baldwin. This is my big issue with this. If we want to go back to this, real quick, this is my big issue with this. Like, dunking on Alec Baldwin is going to win exactly nothing. And you could take that effort that you're using to dunk on Alec Baldwin and, do things that are way more productive than dunking on Alec Baldwin. That's my only point there. But, that's actually not where this story about the school board ends. We actually have, I pulled up this tweet from Unwokeable because I had a great chat with Unwokeable on Thursday. You should, if you're interested in like inside baseball, like anti-CRT stuff, Unwokeable is a chapter leader for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, otherwise known as FAIR. And we had a whole chat about FAIR on this channel on Thursday. So I highly recommend you look at that. But part of the reason Unwokeable and I had that chat is because FAIR, when the original DOJ memo came out, FAIR issued the most pathetic response to it that I've ever seen in my life. Now, that impacted many people for many reasons, but Unwokeable was one of those people because Unwokeable is a chapter leader in Oklahoma for FAIR, and his chapter members were pretty pissed at that letter. So he tweeted out, "This, combined with proof of collusion from the White House that came out yesterday, more than justifies the criticisms of Fair for All's response letter made by me and Unwokeable on the stream. And we hope that Fair learns this lesson." But what he's talking about is this memo that the National School Board Association actually issued, like, after it was discovered that their CEO colluded with the White House. They issued an apology. They retracted the original memo. Let's take a look. This was issued just the other day on October 22nd from the NSBA. As you know, from their board of directors, that board of directors that didn't approve the letter in the first place. As you all know, there has been extensive media, and other attention recently around our letter to President Biden regarding threats and acts of violence against school board members. We wanted to write you directly to address this matter. On behalf of the NSBA, we regret and apologize for that letter. To be clear, the safety of school board members, other public officials, and educators and students is our top priority, and there remains important work to be done on this issue. However, there was no justification for some of the language included in that letter. We should have a better process in place to allow for consultation on a communication of this significance. We apologize also for the strain and stress this situation has caused you and your organizations. As we've reiterated since the letter was sent, we deeply value not only the work of local school boards that make important contributions within our communities, but also the voices of parents who should and must continue to be heard when it comes to decisions about their child's education, health, and safety. We are going to do better going forward. We are engaged in a formal review of our processes and procedures. We will announce specific improvements soon to ensure there is improved coordination and consultation among our staff, our board, and members of and members across the country. The review will include not only the proceedings leading to the letter, but also other related concerns raised by members even before the letter was sent. We will have more to share with you soon as our review continues. Blah 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 blah. So the board of the NSBA basically completely retracted the letter that the CEO sent. And like I said, I really hope that this board fires that CEO. That CEO is an interim CEO. He had no business doing what he did without the approval of the board, and he deserves to be fired. They need to bring someone else in that cares more about actually serving the members of their organization than they do about pleasing the Biden administration. And there's another piece of this that I didn't really cover, which is the NSBA actually experienced like an act of rebellion among their different state associations, including the one in New Hampshire. The New Hampshire chapter of the NSBA actually denounced that initial memo. I think like 12, it was either 12 or 18 other states did as well. So their members were not pleased. And this is exactly what needs to happen when these things occur. People can't keep their mouths shut about it. You have to speak up. You have to be aggressive. You have to be assertive, unlike what FAIR did, which I've covered in other videos on this channel, so I don't feel the need to rehash it here. But unlike what FAIR did, you need to be aggressive and assertive and stand your ground, because this is a win for all of us. They lost. We won. They retracted the letter. Is this White House even real? So much make-believe. I mean, it is real, and we're going to have to deal with it every day for the next 3.5 years. But it didn't stop there, because Josh Hawley has now called for Attorney General Merrick Garland to resign after he mobilized the FBI to intimidate parents without legal basis. So, again, let's just make sure we know where we are. The White House colludes with the National School Board Association to get the National School Board Association to write a memo so that Merrick Garland can then weaponize the Justice Department against parents speaking at school board meetings. In other words, Merrick Garland specifically colluded to weaponize the FBI against political opponents. They're weaponizing the full force of the federal government against political opponents, who in this case just happen to be parents that are speaking for 2 minutes at a school board meeting. By the way, a speech that if you watch this channel, you know won't even make a difference anyway, because unless you live in Vermont and Connecticut, your school board has absolutely no power to dictate curriculum. So it doesn't even make a difference anyway. It's just a parent giving up and getting a fiery speech. Doesn't result in anything. And they deemed this so important that they weaponized the Justice Department, and Josh Hawley has something to say about that. Republican Senator Josh Hawley in Missouri is calling for Attorney General Merrick Garland to resign after Garland mobilized the FBI to intimidate parents without legal basis, Hawley argues Garland's actions were a dangerous abuse of authority. Now, I know a lot of people now are saying, I'm so glad Merrick Garland isn't on the Supreme Court. And dude, I agree. I will say that I do believe he still should have been given a hearing back in the day because that's the process you're supposed to follow. And then you vote no. You man up, you follow the process, and then you vote no. And I'm just going to remind you guys before you start disagreeing with me that the reason that Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation was such a shit show was entirely because the Republicans pulled this stunt of not giving Merrick Garland a hearing in the first place. They could have given him a hearing and voted no. They chose not to do that, which bit them in the ass 4 years later. The whole thing could have been avoided entirely if they just followed the damn process. But no, here we are. Anyway, I'm glad he's not on the Supreme Court too if he's going to behave like this. But that doesn't mean you throw principles out the flipping window when they are inconvenient. You follow the process, otherwise karma will always bite you in the ass every single damn time. Hawley's remarks came shortly after the National School Board Association issued an apology memo to its members Friday and claimed that there was no justification for some of the language included in the letter. The letter was sent just before Garland issued a memorandum instructing the FBI to take the lead on a task force to address threats against school officials, including the creation of a centralized way to report such threats. Merrick Garland mobilized the FBI to intimidate parents without legal basis. And now we know, premised on misinformation, he didn't even bother to verify. Hawley wrote in a tweet, "It was a dangerous abuse of authority that has badly compromised the Justice Department's integrity and Garland's. He should resign." Earlier this month, Hawley grilled Deputy Attorney General Lisa over the Justice Department's handling of the situation, calling the actions truly extraordinary. I think parents across the country are going to be stunned to learn, that if they show up at a local school board meeting where they have the right to vote and you are attempting to intimidate them, you are attempting to silence them, you are attempting to interfere with their rights as parents. And yes, with their rights as voters, Hawley said at the time. This is wrong. This is dangerous. And I cannot believe that Attorney General of the United States is engaging in this kind of conduct. And then they rehash what happened with the letter. In a letter to Garland, half of the 8 members of the Commission on Civil Rights requested specific examples of harassment, blah, 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 blah. That's really all we need to know there. So Josh Hawley has called for Merrick Garland's resignation. I think we can probably bet that that's probably not going to happen. But that's where we are. Now, as a reminder, some people might be questioning, how do we get here? How did we get here in the first place where the Attorney General of the United States, the most important thing that he has to worry about is parents at school board meetings? Well, let's talk about one of the things that's leading to these parents going to school board meetings. This is out of CBS Boston. Lawsuit claims Wellesley schools excluded white students from events and banned Blue Lives Matter phrase. Now, for people who don't know, Wellesley is a suburb of Boston. It is really rich and really bougie and really woke. Fun fact, so last year, Wellesley College, if any of you have ever seen the movie Mona Lisa Smile, it's about an all-girls school of like uppity rich women. Like that's Wellesley College. And Wellesley College last year, it's an all-girls school, but last year they had one of their students transition to become a man. And then that student was removed from like a leadership committee that they happened to be on because they were no longer a woman. And it was just really ironic that all of a sudden, like this person that's going to like the most bougie women's school like in the country that exists became a white male with all the privilege that's associated with it in the course of a semester and then couldn't serve on leadership committees for the school. Anyway, I digress. But that's what you need to know about Wellesley. Wellesley is where Hillary Clinton went to school. It is extremely uppity. Let's listen to what this town did. A nonprofit group representing 3 Massachusetts families has filed a federal lawsuit against Wellesley Public Schools, claiming the district violated the constitutional rights of their students. According to the suit, Wellesley held racially segregated events for students where certain students were invited, but white students were specifically excluded. The suit also alleges that the district suppresses the First Amendment rights of students with their policy on biased speech. In one instance, the lawsuit says the district allegedly told students that the phrase Blue Lives Matter in support of law enforcement is associated with white supremacy. The group Parents Defending Education, man. Parents Defending Education coming in again. Listen, I've been bitching and complaining a lot about FAIR the last few weeks. There are good organizations to support in this space. Part of the reason I've been complaining so much about FAIR is that FAIR has like all of the money. They have all of the resources. Whereas groups like Parents Defending Education, which is Asra Nomani's group, or you have Elena Fishbaum's No Left Turn in Education, they're struggling for resources. They're struggling for donations, but they're the ones that are really doing the good work. And Parents Defending Ed has been on point lately, man. That is a good organization. If you have a donation to give to something like Parents Defending Ed, No Left Turn in Education. Do not give it to FAIR. FAIR does not need it. Give it to these groups. They're doing better work. Anyway, the group Parents Defending Education wants a judge to stop Wellesley's policies. This is not how public schools that operate with public tax dollars should be conducting themselves. Nicole Nilly, the president of Parents Defending Education, says it is fundamentally un-American to discriminate against students or separate students, segregate students, treat them differently on the basis of race. It's un-American and it's also unconstitutional. So we'll see what happens there. But that's the type of crap that's been going on in schools all over the country for a little while now. And the other part of the problem is the mainstream media. Washington Post, I'm looking at you. Check out this op-ed from the Washington Post when this got published 3 days ago. Parents claim they have the right to shape their kids' school curriculum. They don't. Oh golly gee, isn't it just a coincidence that this came up as Virginia's governor's race is about to really be decided based on stuff that's going on with the schools? Guys, Terry McAuliffe might actually lose the governor's race in Virginia, all because of this issue. So, of course, the Washington Post is running interference for him. Let's read this op-ed. In their search for issues that will deliver Congress in 2022, conservatives have begun to circle around the cause of parents' rights. In Indiana, Republican Attorney General Todd recently introduced a Parents' Bill of Rights, which asserts that educational policy and curriculum should accurately reflect the values of Indiana families. In Florida, the legislature passed an even more comprehensive bill assuring that the state and its public schools cannot infringe on the fundamental rights of parents. A growing number of states are allowing parents to sue school districts that teach banned concepts, and in Virginia, here's the real problem. Republican Glenn Youngkin has made parents a centerpiece of his campaign for governor, staging Parents Matter rallies and declaring parents should be in charge of their children's education. Now, can you imagine a land? So a couple things as we make our way through this article. Number one, we have to always remember, and this is something that Sloan Ratchmuth said on my channel a couple weeks ago, we have to always remember that every single time that we are talking about what is going on in the public schools, we are talking about the government. Every single time the public schools are brought into the equation, we have to remind ourselves that they are government-run schools. They are government-funded schools. They are government-staffed schools. They are government-run schools. We need to start thinking of the two of them as interchangeable, because the greatest trick that the teachers' unions ever played was convincing us that teachers are not government employees. They are employees of the state. They are pushing the state agenda, and the state compels your children to go to those schools. unless you have an alternative like homeschooling, which you should all be doing if you can. So we always have to remember that. But I also find it a little ironic that people have the gall to tell parents that they should just have no say over the education of their children. I don't know how many parents we have in the chat. I don't have kids, but I sure as hell, if I did, wouldn't be allowing anyone to tell me that I have no right to have a say in how my child is educated. But this is in the Washington Post. Let's keep going. Given this frenzy, one must reasonably conclude that radicals are out to curtail the established rights that Americans have over the educational sphere. Who are the radicals in this case? Who are the radicals? The people who are, does the Washington Post consider parents who want to be involved in their kids' education the radicals? Or do they consider the schools who don't want their parents involved in kids' education radicals? Because the schools seem a whole lot more radical to me than the parents do. Yet what's actually radical here is the assertion that of parental powers that have never previously existed. I'm going to read that again. Yet what's actually radical here is the assertion of parental powers that have never previously existed. That is not to say that parents should have no influence over how their children are taught, but common law and case law in the United States have long supported the idea that education should prepare young people to think for themselves, even if that runs counter to the wishes of their parents. Now, of course, the problem, as we all know on this channel, is that the schools are not teaching children how to think for themselves. They're not doing that at all. The schools are indoctrinating children into a far left progressive ideology, showing them no other view of the world, and doing this from the time that they are in pre-K. In the words of legal scholar Jeff Schulman, this effort may well divide parents from child, but not because socialist educators want to indoctrinate children, but because learning to think for oneself is what children do. So what they're saying is like, the schools may make your children little socialists, but it's just because they're thinking for themselves. Your kids are just learning how to have empathy for others in schools. And that's why they're becoming little socialists. It's because they're thinking for themselves. It's really the parents who are trying to prevent children from thinking for themselves. It's not the schools. It's the parents. The reason we learn, hi Deb, I don't know too many 6-year-olds begging to be told they might not be the gender they thought they were. I think that's an interesting, yeah. I don't know too many 6-year-olds who are begging to be taught that either, or begging their teachers to do a gender identity spectrum chart on the chalkboard. It's crazy. When do the interests of parents and children diverge? Generally, it occurs when a parent's desire to inculcate a particular worldview denies the child exposure to other ideas and values that an independent young person might wish to embrace or at least entertain. To turn over all decisions to parents, then, would risk inhibiting the ability of young people to think independently. They're arguing that parents just want to shelter their kids, and therefore the schools have to be responsible for exposing kids to other ideas that the evil parents just don't want them exposed to. As the political scientist Rob Reich has argued, minimal autonomy requires, especially for its civic importance, the child to be able to examine his or her own political values and beliefs and those of others with a critical eye. If we value the end, the structure of schooling cannot simply replicate in every particularity the values and beliefs of the child's home. No one's asking for that. The problem is that children are graduating from the public schools completely unable to think for themselves. Completely unable to think. Deb continues, If that's true, they should have no trouble giving equal time in school to the view that marriage is between one man and one woman and that sex is binary according to biology. Let them choose. Well, of course, we know that's not being taught in the schools. And listen, like, I have no issue with gay marriage. I don't have an issue with trans people either. But that's, I think, the point that Deb's making is that if this is truly about teaching people to think for themselves and just presenting the facts and letting people make up their own minds given the evidence, then all positions should be presented. But of course, we know that's not what's going on in the schools. What happens in the schools if it if a student accidentally misgenders a classmate? Maybe one of these kids that has suddenly come to the realization that they're trans or non-binary and their classmates have known them as one thing their entire lives, but all of a sudden, like, next year they come home from summer and they're completely different, or they come back to school rather from summer, then they're just a different person, and the kid accidentally misgenders them. You know what happens in the school? That kid that accidentally misgenders them is given a really stern talking to at absolute best, because they're not doing those things. They're not. Let's keep going. The law has long reflected this. Consider homeschooling, which, by the way, if you're interested in homeschooling, you definitely want to check out Deb's channel, The Reason We Learn. She's the homeschool guru. But by the way, they're going to be going after homeschooling next. They're going to try to outlaw homeschooling next. Just you wait for it. Although, here, they're even going to talk about it right here. Consider homeschooling. Although it is legal across the country, states still regulate its practice. Such regulations often aren't enforced, but they certainly are on the books. Homeschooling parents can be required to establish minimal academic qualifications, to submit examples of a student's work to school district administrators, or even adopt a state approved curriculum. As the Supreme Court noted in Wisconsin v. Yoder, a case that's granted Amish parents the widest possible exemption from state control, there is no doubt as to the power of the state having a higher responsibility for education of its citizens to impose reasonable regulations for control and duration of basic education. And as the court made clear in an earlier case, Pierce versus Society of Sisters, the state concerns itself not just with the well being of the child, but also with what the justices broadly call the public welfare. The sudden push for parental rights, then, isn't a response to substantive changes in education or the law. It's a political tactic. Writing in the 1960s, historian Richard Hofstadter observed that conservatives felt that the country had been taken away from them and their kind, and that time-worn American values had been eaten away by cosmopolitan intellectuals. In response, they took up what he called the paranoid style, an approach to politics characterized by heated exaggeration, suspiciousness, and conspiratorial fantasy. Well, turns out many of those conspiracies actually turned out to be true, but where I will agree is that I think conservatives play this game extremely poorly. I think conservatives spend a lot of energy screaming about things that don't make a difference. I think that conservatives don't fight the battles that should be fought. I think conservatives generally act as controlled opposition to the left, just saying everything the left does is bad without presenting a vision for the country of what they want to achieve. On that, I can absolutely say that I don't think conservatives do a good job. The paranoid style of politics is particularly useful as a mechanism for organizing opposition, and the Republicans employing it right now have two particular targets in mind. The first is the public education system, which hardliners have long sought to undermine. Well, to be fair, this isn't just Republicans. If I had my way, and as we all know, I was a Republican for about 15 minutes, I had a one night stand with the Republican Party before I decided that, you know, I just had too much to drink the night before and it was a bad decision. And when I woke up the next morning, I saw that it wasn't what I thought it was. So I had a one night stand with the Republican Party, and yet I think the public education system should be absolutely abolished. I am extremely accelerationist in this regard, and so are most of the people that I talk to, and most of them are not Republicans. At an annual cost of nearly $750 billion, tuition-free open enrollment education represents one of the nation's most substantive commitments to the public good. But well before Ronald Reagan's failed attempts to introduce vouchers in 1980s, conservatives were making the case for a privatized system, one in which families, not taxpayers, would bear the cost of education. Well, that's not entirely true, is it? Because what they're saying is that the dollars should follow the student. The dollars should follow the student. That student wants to go to the public school in their town? Fine. That student wants to go to a completely different school? That works too. And what is this idea with like one in which families, not taxpayers? Are they saying that families are not taxpayers? I'm sorry, but last I checked, families paid taxes. I pay property tax, 3/4 of which goes to fund the public school in my town that I don't even use because I don't have kids. Do I not have to pay property tax? Actually, that's something I'm going to try to do in New Hampshire. I'm going to try to nullify paying property tax. I think it's a good idea. Anyway, and governance would happen through free market rather than democratic politics. In recent, well, the two options are not actually free market versus democratic politics. Why should democratic politics impact what's been taught in the schools? Conservative legislators across the United States have introduced bills creating education savings account, private school tuition tax credits, and other forms of neo-vouchers that package old ideological wine in new bottles. So the question that we should all ask, because remember, when it comes to the public schools, that's the government. Why does the Democratic Party and the Washington Post and the progressives and the woke left, why do all of them want so badly for the government to control education? That's the question that we should be asking. Why do every single one of these groups want the government to control how children are educated? Not parents, the government. Why is that considered preferable? Because the political right doesn't want this. Libertarians definitely don't want this. Libertarians don't want the government involved at all. People on the political right, at least usually minimally, want people to have a choice where they go. Why is it so critical to the Democratic Party that the government be in charge of educating your child? But this play is much bigger than education. For years, the Republican Party has understood the demographic tide is against it. Knowing that every vote matters, the GOP has relied on a strategy of voter suppression. Simultaneously, Republicans have worked to ensure that their base turns out in force by stroking white racial grievance. And I'm actually shocked beyond belief that white is capitalized because they usually don't do that. The recent firestorm over critical race theory is a perfect case in point. Never mind that this concept from legal scholarship isn't actually taught in K through 12 schools, or that it isn't what most protesters believe it is to be. You know what's funny? I actually almost pulled this up, but then I realized it was like from back in June. The Myth-Informed account earlier this week tweeted out a resolution from like the National Mayors Association where they resolved that critical race theory absolutely should be taught in public schools. We know Kimberly Crenshaw herself led a several-day conference a couple months ago called Critical Race Theory Summer School, in which there was an entire track about critical race theory in the schools. So the Washington Post lies again. Homer Simpson says, "Let's go, Brandon." Absolutely. Republicans gain an electoral advantage by convincing their base that white children are being taught to hate themselves, their family, and their country. That's all true. Whether this supposed attack on the American way of life is being coordinated by Black Lives Matter activists, Marxist educators, or Antifa operatives, the point, as Hofstadter observed, is to generate an enemy thought of as totally evil and completely unappeasable. Well, A broken clock is right twice a day, and Richard Hofstadter is not wrong. But that doesn't mean that the woke left is not totally evil and totally unappeasable. Of course they are. Courts have found that parents have great authority when it comes to deciding how to raise and educate their children. This right does not mean that public schools, government, must cater to parents' individual ideas about education. Parents can opt out of public schools if they wish, and they should, and pay to send their children to private or religious schools. But even there, parents' rights remain subject to state regulation and override. Well, actually, parents actually have less rights when they send their kids to private schools. They have less rights. So don't like so Deb makes this point all the time. But like if you're thinking about sending your kids to private schools, man, just take that tuition money and hire a private tutor. Homeschool with a private tutor. Because you're gonna have a much more control. You have less control over your kids when they're in private schools than you do when you're homeschooling. In framing our public schools as extremist organizations that undermine the prerogative of families, conservatives are bringing napalm to the fight. They may rally the base and tilt a few elections in their favor. Yeah, they're probably going to tilt that one in Virginia to their favor, it looks like. But with any scorched earth, these people have some nerve. We're going to talk about who wrote this article in a second, but these people have some nerve claiming that it's conservatives who are doing the scorched earth strategy. Listen, I have my issues with conservatives. I've already voiced a few of them in this here video. But it is not conservatives who are implementing the scorched earth strategy. It's the woke left and the Democratic Party. But as with any scorched earth campaign, the cost of this conflict may be borne long after the fighting stops. Parents may end up with a new set of rights, only to discover that they have lost something even more fundamental in the process. Turned against their school and their democracy, they may wake from their conspiratorial fantasies to find a pile of rubble and heaps of ashes. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I wouldn't be disappointed to find the Department of Education in a pile of rubble and heaps of ashes. Figuratively, of course, not literally, YouTube. Figuratively. I wouldn't be disappointed at all to find the Department of Education in a figurative pile of rubble and heaps of ashes. Dare to dream. Well, let's look at who wrote this here opinion piece. Jack Schneider is an assistant professor of education at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Jennifer Berkshire is a freelance journalist. So we should listen to a journalist, and a professor of education at the University of Massachusetts. Okay. Okay. Well, that's what we have for stuff going on with the schools. So let's keep going though. I've got some other topics I want to talk about. But guys, if you have just joined me, please make sure you mount that like button if you're enjoying this stream so far. Effed Up News is a stream that I do usually on Sundays at 5 p.m. most every week, unless I'm traveling or something. So it's just a cavalcade of really messed up news stories, and then we talk about them and mock them relentlessly and do what we do. If you're enjoying it so far, please make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're watching on. I am on my main YouTube channel. I am on Odyssey. I am on Rockfin, and I'm even on my Facebook page for as long as I'm allowed to have a Facebook page. My Facebook page, fun fact, my Facebook page has actually been restricted since December of last year because I quoted the New York Times on it, and it's been restricted ever since. So I don't know. Who knows how long I'll have one? Whatever. But let's keep going. I want to change the topic to vaccines. Now, as we all know, I did the thing this week that YouTube wanted me to do, which is I got myself vaccinated. I am now safe. I am now in the blessed class. I did it because I'm a very selfish person that wants to be able to travel to London in less than a month, and I don't want to sit in quarantine for 2 weeks. That's why I did it. I also don't believe the vaccine's going to hurt me. And the CDC doesn't believe that either. And the CDC really wants you to get the vaccine. The CDC is your God when it comes to the vaccine. I have to say that, or else YouTube doesn't like it when I talk about vaccines. But I wanted to talk about this article. This is a real article that is really on CNN that was posted on Friday evening. And let's just take a look at the headline for a second. People vaccinated against COVID-19 less likely to die from any cause. So I'm actually thrilled to hear that because I am vaccinated and I did the thing that YouTube wanted me to do, and I'm now in the blessed class. I'm glad to hear that I'm like less likely to die if I go sky jumping, like skydiving, and like the parachute doesn't open, or I'm less likely to die if like I'm in a car accident, or I'm less likely to die if someone fires a gun at me. Like I feel like I've gained immunity. I've gained immortality. Perhaps not from COVID. Although, check the CDC. I'm not a medical doctor. Check the CDC. The vaccine is perfect and beautiful and wonderful. I am thrilled to hear that I am invincible, according to CNN. Let's read this article. People who got COVID-19 vaccines were not only less likely to die from the virus, but were also less likely to die from any cause over the following months, researchers reported on Friday. The research team was trying to demonstrate that the 3 authorized COVID-19 vaccines are safe, and they say their findings clearly demonstrate that. Now, here's the first problem. The research team was trying to demonstrate that the 3 authorized COVID-19 vaccines are safe. When you start a research project, you should not be trying to demonstrate a certain hypothesis. Your goal is actually to prove the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is nothing is happening. That is what the goal of any properly done scholarly research is. To prove the null hypothesis, to prove that nothing is happening. If you cannot prove the null hypothesis, then you are able to say, okay, there's a correlation or a causation here. But no, that's not what they're doing here. They were trying to demonstrate a specific outcome. And then by pure coincidence, they achieved that outcome. They were trying to demonstrate something and they were successful at demonstrating that thing. Recipients of the Pfizer, Moderna, or J&J vaccines had lower non-COVID-19 mortality rates than did the unvaccinated comparison group, the researchers wrote in a weekly report for the U.S. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. Oh, they did it for the CDC. The CDC, where we should go for all of our vaccine-related information, according to YouTube. So make sure you're checking with the CDC. COVID-19 vaccines authorized in the United States have shown again and again to be safe. This study confirms their safety. Well, apparently, it not only confirms their safety, it also confirms that I have invincibility from anything. This is extremely good news. Who knows what might happen when I go to London? I don't know. Could be a terrorist attack. Maybe the Queen dies and there's like a riot or an uprising. There'll be an uprising. With my luck, when I go to London, there's going to be an uprising of the proletariat when the Queen dies. An overthrow of the monarchy. And I am now invincible from any of these eventualities. Fantastic. In fact, it shows that people vaccinated for COVID-19 had lower death rates than those who were not vaccinated, even when COVID deaths were excluded. That's in addition to the mounting evidence from other studies showing that the COVID-19 vaccines are effective against COVID-19 infection, serious illness, and death. The team studied 6.4 million people who had been vaccinated against COVID-19 and compared them with 4.6 million people who had received flu shots in recent years, but had not been vaccinated against the coronavirus. They filtered out anyone who had not died from COVID-19 or after a recent positive coronavirus test. During December 2020 and July 2021, COVID-19 vaccine recipients had lower rates of non-COVID-19 mortality than did unvaccinated persons after adjusting for age, race, sex, blah, 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 blah. People who got 2 doses of Pfizer were 34% as likely to die of non-coronavirus causes in the following months as unvaccinated people, the study found. People who got 2 doses of Moderna were 30%, 31% as likely to die as unvaccinated people. And those who got the J&J, which is what I got, were 54% as likely to die. Okay, so I'm a little less invincible than if I got the Pfizer or Moderna, but I still have a pretty high degree of invincibility, and I think that's good news for me. Dragonwater said, I will send you some kryptonite and see what happens. I don't like that idea, Dragonwater. I don't think that's going to work out well. Part of this is probably because people who got vaccinated tend to be healthier than people who don't, the researchers noted. I don't know what they're basing that on, but fine. The lower mortality rate after COVID-19 vaccination suggests substantial healthy vaccine-y. There's an extra vaccine-y effects, i.e. vaccinated persons tend to be healthier than unvaccinated persons, which will be explored in future analysis. These findings reinforce the safety profile of currently approved COVID-19 vaccines in the United States. All persons aged 12 and older should receive a COVID-19 vaccine, they concluded. I'm going to leave it up to all of you to decide whether or not you agree with the study that says people who are vaccinated are less likely to die from anything. Because according to YouTube, I can only tell you what the CDC wants me to tell you. And the CDC funded this study. And so this is obviously what the CDC wants me to tell you. So I can't just tell you any differently than that. I would be violating YouTube's policies. I'd probably get a strike on my channel. So you all have the article. We read it in full. You know, the CDC is your god insofar as the vaccine is related. But, you know, vaccines have made people crazy. Not vaccines. Vaccines are fine. Like, whatever. Again, like, I'm vaccinated. I don't have an issue with it. I just, I have issues about whether or not it should be mandated, but, I made a choice to go get it for myself. But there are also people out there who can't make choices for themselves. And, this entire thing has made people lose their minds. And it's making some people do extremely horrible things to people who do not have the ability to defend themselves. So on this one, I want to let this video kind of speak for itself. I'm gonna stop the share on my screen because I want you guys to hear the sound from this. I have to open in another browser. Hang on. Chrome tab. Okay, I just want to play this video. This is posted by Moms for Liberty on Twitter. I just want to play this video, and I want all of you to kind of decide for yourself what you think about the story told in this video. This is from a Florida legislator talking about what's going on in the public government schools.
Special needs When she got off the school bus a few days ago, her father saw her and she was wearing a mask. Now, in my school district, we have an illegal mask mandate, but she was wearing a mask, even though even under their own illegal mask mandates rules, she shouldn't have had to. But it wasn't enough that she was wearing a mask because she's a special needs nonverbal Down syndrome child, who, by the way, 3 weeks earlier, the school district had called the parents and said, your daughter's taking her shoes off in school. Could you help us to make sure she keeps her shoes on? They were willing to call about that. When her father saw her get off the school bus, she was wearing a mask and it was tied around her head with nylon rope. The mask was full of saliva. The girl couldn't breathe. Father's furious. How could they do that to my daughter today? So he went to the school and he talked to the school and he found out they didn't do it that day. They had tied this mask around her face every single day for the previous 6 weeks that she was in school. They just forgot to take it off that day before they sent her home. So when the parent said, "What on earth were you thinking?" to the teacher and to the principal, their answer was, "The school board told us that our students all had to wear masks." There's a special place in hell for the 3 people who did this to this girl. This girl experienced real child abuse at the hands of the Brevard County School Board. And I will tell you this session, there's going to be hell to pay for the people who did that. Seeing no further business, Vice Chair Bell moves.
So, a young girl that had Down syndrome was sent to school without wearing a mask because she couldn't breathe, and came home every day not wearing a mask, except for one day when she was brought home and the mask was still tied around her head using a nylon rope. And the teachers, when asked about this, said that they'd been doing it for the past 6 weeks against the wishes of the parents. And that, like, what else could they do? What else could they be expected to do? The school mandated everyone wear masks. We just had to tie a mask around a child's head with a nylon rope. This is child abuse. We have lost our humanity in the past year and 9 months. I don't know in what universe it should ever be considered acceptable for teachers in a government school to gag a 6-year-old child with Down syndrome all day, every day for 6 weeks, and then say, well, what else could we do? What else could we? These people should never be around children again. Children should never be left alone with these people again. They have lost their privileges, so far as I'm concerned. This is abuse. This is neglect. And it is funded by your taxpayer dollars. I can't. I'm almost speechless with how pissed I am. And people wonder why parents are going to school board meetings. People wonder why parents are angry. It's because of shit like this. Stuff like this happens every single day in government schools all over the country. And the people that you entrust your children to are throwing up their hands and acting like innocent victims, and they quit. What else did you want us to do? We just had no other options other than to gag a 6-year-old with Down syndrome with a mask all day, every day for weeks. I really don't know if I have hope for us to turn it around when we have a significant portion of the population who is so unable to think for themselves that they think that behavior like this is acceptable. These are people whose literal job it is to take care of kids. You know, it was the special needs parents who first started pushing for cameras in classrooms. I talked to a bunch of them when I was originally like doing research to vet the idea. It was the parents of special needs kids. They were completely supportive. They wanted this because the schools have been abusing their kids for years. They wanted this. And it's all for things like this. And clearly nothing has improved. It's probably only gotten worse. Because now all the children under 12 are unvaccinated, and oh my god, we have to get them all vaccinated. They're all horrible little bastions of virus, of plague. Of course, you should consult the CDC for all vaccine-related information. Of course, the CDC is on the verge of recommending that 5 through 11-year-olds get vaccinated. Schools are mandating that people be vaccinated in order to attend. Diane B asks, is it time for cameras in classrooms? Well, Matt Walsh is championing that idea now. I gave up because Matt Walsh is just the rightful and proper leader of cameras in classrooms, and it was made very clear to me that people don't want me working on it. But Matt Walsh, I'm sure, has a plan and a team and is putting a strategy in place, and maybe Matt Walsh will get cameras in classrooms for everyone. Who knows? Who knows? But I wanted to make sure you guys saw that video if you hadn't heard about that story. I do want to end on something a little different. Now, vaccine related. It is vaccine related. But this comes from Project Veritas reporting that one of their whistleblowers was fired by Pfizer. And I think that this letter of termination is just hilarious. I wanted to end on this because I just think this termination letter is hilarious. I think it's hilarious. Check this out. I'm not commenting on this one. I'm not commenting on Pfizer. I'm not commenting on vaccines. I don't want any grief, YouTube. I'm commenting specifically on this termination letter. This says, Miss Mickety, as you are aware, your short-term disability leave, which commenced on August 24th, 2021, ended yesterday on October 19th. On or about September 28th, 2021, you informed your manager that you were not returning to work at the end of your leave, and your manager informed you that this would be considered a resignation from employment. You also have previously authorized you also have previously issued or authorized other public statements that you are no longer employed by Pfizer. Accordingly, we have accepted your resignation from employment effective today, October 20th, 2021. If you have any property on site, we will arrange to have it packed or shipped to your address on file. It also came to our attention that you breached your April 30th, 2013 employee agreement with a company acquired by Pfizer by transferring and disclosing without permission documents from Pfizer's internal information system for unauthorized purposes. Given this conduct is in violation of your agreement and applicable company policies, even if you had not expressed your voluntary resignation from employment, which we have accepted, we would have proceeded to terminate your employment effective today. Enclosed with this letter are additional documents related to your separation from employment, including a summary of your benefits post-separation. Sincerely, Pfizer Colleague Service Center. So what I love about this termination letter is this is like, you know what this is? This is like right out of The Simpsons. Pfizer is literally saying, Melissa, you can't quit. You're fired. That's what's literally happening. Like, Pfizer's whistleblower, the one who went to Project Veritas, obviously knew she was going to get fired when she went to Project Veritas, right? So she voluntarily resigned, just said, I'm just not coming back to work. And then Pfizer said, you can't quit. You're fired. And then they didn't even have the temerity to sign their name, because this whole second paragraph, this was not necessary. This was not necessary at all in any way. This was just spiteful and vindictive, was all this was spiteful and vindictive. And they didn't even have the temerity to sign it from an actual person. So Melissa got Pfizer good. Pfizer's obviously pretty pissed off at her if this is the separation letter that they issued. You can't quit. You're fired. It's like they're stomping their feet. I just thought that was great. I thought that was the perfect way to end the show. Dragon Water said, I would say it's time for an end of the public school system. Dragon Water, I think you are right as rain there. All right, guys, that's all I have for Effed Up News for this week. Again, this is a stream that I do on Sundays at 5 p.m. to go over some of the more ridiculous news stories of the week. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, please make sure you mount that like button on whatever platform you happen to be watching on. Also, please make sure that if you are not subscribed to my channel, whether that be on YouTube or Rockfin or Odyssey, wherever you're watching, but especially on YouTube, because YouTube unsubscribed a whole bunch of people from my account yesterday, please make sure you're subscribed. Please make sure you turn on notifications. And it really helps me out if you share my content out with your friends and family. It is really the only way that my channel is going to grow now, because I'm like cordoned off in some crazy, ridiculous YouTube jail. And of course, please make sure, if you want the really good stuff, that you join my locals community, kb.locals.com. It's in the ticker down below. And you can join for free just to see what's going on there, to get you get ad-free videos, you get to see a whole bunch of stuff that I don't actually post publicly, which is fun. But if you want to support the work I'm doing, please make sure you head over to kb.locals.com and sign up as a supporter, which will unlock all the features of Locals. It'll get you 2 Zoom calls a week. It'll get you a book club. It'll get you debate club. This week, guys, check this out. This week on Thursday, Benjamin Boyce is coming to my locals for a private chat with people just in my locals community. It's not going to be recorded. It is exclusively for my locals supporters. So now's the time. Make sure you sign up. You'll get the voice of reason all to ourselves for a nice little Zoom call on Thursday. $5 a month. You can do it at $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free, or you can make a one-time gift. I hope to see you guys in locals, and I will definitely see you back here next week, Sunday at 5 o'clock, for another edition of Effed Up News. All right, guys, that's all. Take care. Have a good one.